So it's just really important that I know it's in the heat of the moment and there could be some, you know, high energy stuff going on if you actually have somebody that's having an event down there, but be sure to try to get as much information out and let them know that it's a confined space, or, you know, the guy's 30 feet down a hole, or he's in a pipe, or a, you know, water tank, or in an excavation. That'll just get the right people going. And then on our side of things, we'll kind of meet and station really quick, decide which vehicles we need to take and who else we need to make sure is coming. And en route on our computers, we'll start activating like our hazmat team. We could start making phone calls to United Rentals to start building this trench boxes, or just to let them know we're headed out on something. And we've kind of, I don't know if we have a contract or if it's just an agreement, but they know that if we call them and say we have an emergency, they'll cut guys loose and get a flatbed truck ready to roll for us with whatever we need on it. And so we'll start pre-planning things ahead of time, making sure that there's a back truck either on site or coming. And then from your guys' standpoint, the question came up on day one, like, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to get all of our equipment out of the way? Do you want us to, you know, go in there and try to effect a rescue? What we've found is that the first people that are in the hole are usually the guys that are working with them. You know, you guys are going to try to save your own, of course. So we're not going to tell you not to do that, just as long as you can do it safely. And then to leave your vehicles in place, because part of our operation is to minimize vibration. So we'll we'll look at our maps and contact the railroad if necessary to shut down all train traffic in the area, because, you know, I'm not telling you anything you guys probably don't know, but something loose like this, vibrations can start knocking inside walls if a train goes by. We'll stage our apparatus 150, 200 feet away and come up on the site, and then we'll do this survey. We'll mark off hazards in the area. So we'll start moving air to get good air down there so we can actually operate. And that's why wanted to have our hazmat team come up. We're going to start to incorporate them because they're the brains behind the air monitoring operation. I mean, if it goes beep, we know something's wrong. But if it goes beep, they know why and how to fix it better than we do sometimes. So we're trying to get them to come on our calls and be able to take over that portion so we can concentrate on actually the rescue. But regardless, that will always happen if they're here or not. We'll get air monitoring going. We'll call for utilities or make sure that utilities have been located on the site. And like I've mentioned before, this is a worst case scenario. This is, hopefully there's no contractors out there that are working an 8-foot deep intersecting trench without any shoring. Not to say that it couldn't happen. This is, like I said, worst case scenario. This is probably something that we would see a homeowner job, doing it on the weekend, saving some money, trying to do his own work, and not shoring. But this encompasses all of our training into one scenario, so that's why we like to train with this intersecting team.
You want to do an opposite side set on this corner as well?
So for the company that got themselves into trouble on the first one, it was like a drain company that they were well below their shores. They had 8-foot panels in, and they were about 6 feet below their panels because they missed the pipe, and they were working laterally outside of their way outside of their panel system, and they had a collapse. And so staying within your parameters, your safety parameters, is huge. I mean, trenches are unforgiving, and that was the issue that caused it. And Everything for us was sort of outside the box. We were having to use a ton of supplementals, and so basically our shore, it got small enough where our shore systems, our Paratech systems were just not small enough, and so we were having to use a ton of 4x4s, a ton of wedges, a ton of 6x6s, and having to kind of work outside the box of what we usually use for the systems that we inject into a trench. And we ran into troubles with just access to him and trying to get the dirt. The dirt was wet. It was a lot of clay, and so the most effective means for digging him out was by hand and taking it out with buckets. And it took us about 4.5 hours to get him out. And he was conscious the whole time. When the first arriving unit got there, he was buried to about his neck, and the workers actually jumped in and uncovered his head. And I was in the trench a couple times. The first time I was down there, he was about just below his nipple line, and then the second time I got down in there, he was about like at his pelvis, and some of his legs, top of his legs, were kind of exposed. And a lot of our just like standard stuff that we thought that was going to work just kind of didn't. We brought in a vac truck, and it didn't work that great. The soil was super wet, super sticky, and super muddy, and so we're hoping for maybe some smaller wands to maybe try to like dig and suck at the same time. But basically it was a tube that came down. It was super loud, caused a lot of vibration, and if a trench collapses one time, there's an 80% chance it's going to collapse again. And it was actually just super stressful. And when I was down there trying to dig, and you're already in this ultra stressful environment, and then this giant tube comes down and just goes super loud. So that was kind of stressful. And Donovan was there too. Yeah, talking about the trench. Yeah, taking Zach's job. And so all of our training that we do all the time for this came into play to be basically like keep the operation like running smooth as far as like logistics, like getting our rigs in position and using all of our tools effectively. But once we got down into the bottom of the trench, that's where we sort of had to just kind of do a lot of stuff on the fly and work outside the box. And once you talk about setting up your shores, I did a lot of like with the patient. Donovan set up a lot of the systems down below.
And I think where training and actual calls vary a little bit is this is a great opportunity with this actual dirt trench that's not perfectly square and parallel and loose soil and everything, because where we train is a concrete sided trench, and so it's always the same, it's always square, the measurements are always the same. And so kind of like what I understand we're going to experience with this one, it gets a little narrower at the bottom, you get a little soil in the bottom, and then the trench panels are narrower at the bottom than they are at the top. And so your measurements vary, and we even ran into where some of our smallest shores were too big to shore the bottom of it. And so we were having to cut lumber and do different things. And so that's where this opportunity is going to be super helpful for us, just to build those files on how to solve problems where it's not just the same thing all the time, and always have plenty of room for big shores and that kind of stuff. So in that case, we started at the top with normal threaded shores that we could shoot and expand, but at the bottom, it was down to like just using lumber to keep the trench panels separated at the bottom. And so it was barely enough room to stand like this in some spots at the bottom because it was just so tapered. And it was deep. It was 14 feet-ish. 14-ish. So yeah, it was deep and skinny.
Yeah, most of our logistical systems that we train on worked really effectively for that scene, but the hands-on intricacies of being down in the trench was an organic experience for a lot of us that were down there, which was good. I mean, like, that's how you get better at your job. But it was definitely things work pretty smooth when you're working in a concrete trench that you do a whole bunch, or even this one will be like there's not a human life at stake and there's no
Still
one
relatively
down there.
sterile.
It's pretty sterile still, and I think the biggest thing is for that company, they were outside of their safety parameters, and not just a little bit, but a lot. And those trenches are just super unforgiving. We were having secondary collapses like inside the trench while we were down there working, and it was super scary. It was one of the scariest things I've ever done in my life. And for you folks that are going to be like, making trenches and getting down in them, like, just don't cut corners. I mean, just even if it's going to be 10 seconds where there was a second trench call we had a couple years later. This guy was basically just like moving along as they were sliding the trench box along his working area. He stepped out for just a few seconds and there was a collapse that engulfed him. And I think that just like anything, you do it over and over and over, and practical drift starts to happen, and complacency sets in because you're comfortable. If you're doing that all the time, it's easy to like, oh well, I can just do this real quick, and it's going to save me 10 minutes by doing this for 10 seconds. I could suddenly be a huge problem. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Thank you.